Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video we're going to be doing my top 8 powerful strength builds in Elden Ring. This one should be a lot of fun, it highlights strength, and these are going to hit really hard and basically a lot of bonk weapons. And at number 8 we have the Ruin's Greatsword, an extremely powerful definition of a bonk weapon, really, with an S scaling in strength. Unfortunately, there is some things to talk about with this weapon on New Game Plus and beyond. Overall, though, it is a very reliable strength weapon. And what do I mean by that? Well, the Ash of War on this one scales mainly with weapon level, so once you get it to plus 10, it doesn't really factor in your stats much, so once you get to late game, New Game Plus and beyond, there is a bit of a fall off. The weapon itself, though, for your regular hits, scales very well with strength. I believe it gives you an S, so you're going to get solid damage there. It's just the Ash of War that scales mainly with weapon level. It's mostly physical damage and doesn't really increase much with stat investment. It's actually one of those weapons where if you're able to take that fight on early in Caelid, when you're able to do the duo boss fight at Redmane Castle to get the Ruin's Greatsword drop, if you start upgrading it on your first run, this weapon can be an absolute monster. But of course here, all footage is on New Game Plus 7 for this entire video. We're going to be taking on mainly side bosses. It's going to be mostly spoiler free, as my top 8s I've generally done that. We did get a poise break here, which is a common theme when you're running strength builds. Yeah, definitely something you want to see a lot of when you're running a strength build. Now, poise does increase with each New Game Plus cycle as well. By the time New Game Plus 7 rolls around, it's about 30% more every boss will have in terms of their posture, but with strength builds, you could still get in those poise breaks. It's definitely one you want to check out if you're a strength build. Now, for equipment, we have the Ruin's Greatsword, preferably plus 10. Any steel for buffs. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers, hit 51 poise. Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander. Claw Talisman, Urchu's Favorite, plus 2. Spike Crack tier, Faith tier. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 28 Endurance, 60 Strength, 15 Dexterity, 20 Intelligence. It doesn't really scale much with Intelligence even on the Ash. 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And that's so you can use Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for this very reliable strength build. And at number 7 we have the Starscourge Greatswords, a very reliable weapon that has a really powerful kind of bonk slam down on the Ash of War that can do a ton of physical damage. Now, this has been asked on my channel before, but you only need one set of these to have 2 of them. So for the weight, it's actually a really strong greatsword. For the weight you're getting, the fact that you get 2 is excellent. They also have a pull-in, which works really well on lower poise enemies like we're using here, and that will pull them in, and then you could slam down for the huge damage attack, which is, again, mainly physical damage there. Very powerful Ash and a solid and reliable strength build. This is one I recommend running for fun too. This is a really enjoyable weapon to try. I like the Starscourge Greatswords a lot. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Starscourge Greatswords plus 10. Any seal for buffs, we hit 51 poise. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Roar Medallion, because it is a roar, Ritual Shield Talisman, Magic tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats. So the first part of the Ash of War is a roar, which will be boosted by the Roar Medallion as well as the Highland Axe passive, so take note of that. For stats, same as the Ruin's Greatsword, 60 Vigor, 60 Strength, 20 Intelligence, 25 Faith with a Faith tier, Golden Vow, and Flame Grant Me Strength. And at number 6 we have Bloodhound's Claws, which scale really well with your strength stat and is a solid bleed option. If you want to switch to something bleed that's for strength build, Bloodhound's Claws are excellent for that. With Bloodflame Blade, that'll net you around 100 bleed in total, and you'll get a B in heavy affinity, but overall the damage in heavy affinity on Bloodhound's Claws is excellent, and again, a solid choice to switch to if you're looking for some bleed buildup. And another favorite on this list too is Bloodhound's Claws. When I use Claws, I always pick these a lot. I like their strength scaling and then kind of switching to strength weapons. Let's jump into equipment for this one. And we have Bloodhound's Claws in heavy affinity, and it doesn't matter what Ash. I was using a random one, Impaling Thrust, I think. We have the Claw Mark Seal, we hit 51 poise, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Thorny tier, Faith tier. And for stats, we have 70 Strength, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, we have 31 Endurance. You don't really need that much, but we can use a lot of the other builds with the same setup, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. Of course, we're buffing with Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and of course we're using Bloodflame Blade too, which adds 40 bleed and gives us a total of 100 bleed. And at number 5 we have the Star Fist, an incredible weapon for posture breaking. You can throw on Bloodflame Blade for a little extra damage. I did this mostly with charge attacks, but overall it's a poise breaking machine. Now you can use the Iron Ball too. They have around the same poise damage as the Star Fist, but the innate bleed gives you an added benefit to the Star Fist. Throw on Bloodflame Blade, you can do fast attacks, charged attacks, overall a powerful strength option in heavy affinity. Alright, and we're going to jump into equipment. We have the Star Fist in heavy affinity. We have the Claw Mark Seal, but we're just using it for buffs. We hit 51 poise. Ritual Swords Talisman, Axe Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman. That was meant to be Lord of Blood's Exaltation in the last spot. Spike Crack Tier, Fate Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. Same stats for most of these from now on, so I'm going to go over them relatively quickly for the people using this timestamp. 60 Vigor, 70 Strength, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier. And of course we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade. Now if you're using the Iron Ball, you do not need Blood Flame Blade, but with the Star Fist, it is a solid and powerful combination. And at number 4, we have Spinning Strikes on the Grave Scythe, a build I'm liking more and more. The Grave Scythe scales well in heavy affinity. With this build, you get a lot of successive attack damage and a lot of bleed buildup with Blood Flame Blade. This is one you're going to want to try for fun too. You'll have a really good time using this build. I recommend grabbing Spinning Strikes. I have an early game guide for the Grave Scythe and Spinning Weapon. I'll attach that in the description below, but overall this is a solid strength build. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Grave Scythe in heavy affinity with Spinning Strikes on it. Spinning Weapon's really fun too. We hit 51 poise using Claw Mark Seal, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Thorny Tier, Fate Tier. We're using Sleeping Pots. And for stats are going to look similar again from here on out for the most part. 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance, 70 Strength, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier so we can do our buffs of course. Then we're once again using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade. This build has a lot of damage potential, a lot of successive attack, and bleed build up here. And at number 3, we have the Rusted Anchor with Wild Strikes, a fantastic pure strength build that can build up on successive attacks. It also gives you the option of doing pierce damage, which is great for dragons, and in general is a good damage type. Yeah, because you have counter damage and all that with Wild Strikes too. You can even add the Spear Talisman. I do have a hard time sometimes with getting that one to activate, but overall, as far as counter damage and stuff goes, you have that option with pierce damage that the Rusted Anchor has. Actually, there was a small mistake with this one. I meant to have it in heavy affinity, which is normally what I use it in, but I ended up with blood affinity, and you can see the damage, even with minimal arcane investment, was quite good. So you're generally speaking going to have this in heavy affinity, but it also works really well in blood affinity too. And you would go for heavy affinity here or blood affinity at higher levels, and you have Wild Strikes on the Rusted Anchor, 51 poise, any seal for buffs, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword, and Shield Talisman. We have the Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. And same stats as we saw earlier, we have 60 Vigor, 70 Strength, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier. Yeah, after I was putting this video together, I realized I forgot to change out Blood Affinity. It ended up working out overall anyway. It is good in Blood Affinity, but generally speaking, you'd be in Heavy Affinity with Wild Strikes for this build. Alright, now on to the top 2, and of course at number 2, just using 2 buffs in a tier, this is still an absolute powerhouse of a weapon, and that is the Giant Crusher with Royal Knight's Resolve. The Giant Crusher with Royal Knight's Resolve has been going on since launch, and it's still one of the most absolutely bonk things you can do in Elden Ring, and the definition of a pure strength build. This is one I recommend trying out. This one at number 1 for sure if you're into strength. Then we have the Giant Crusher, which gets an S in heavy affinity with Royal Knight's Resolve. We have any seal for buffs. We hit 51 poise, Ritual Swords Talisman, Axe Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Arsenal Charm +1. Gonna need that for the weight. Spike Crack Tier, Fate Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, here we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance, 70 Strength, 15 Dexterity, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier. Now, this weapon weighs a lot, so you're going to need around 35 endurance or so if you want to use Erdtree's Favor +2, and even more than that if you want to not have a talisman that increases equipment load. Of course, here we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and the Charge tier. And at number 1, the most reliable pure strength build I can think of, and my favorite in the game, is Lion's Claw in combination with Guts for great poise damage, a ton of physical damage, and an incredibly reliable build for pretty much all the bosses in the game. Guts is really excellent in heavy affinity overall, and then Lion's Claw gives you around 40 poise damage per each use of the Ash of War, and generally speaking, between 2,000 and 3,000 damage on most bosses in the game. Generally speaking, 2 pure physical damage is a very reliable type. And by the way, tomorrow's video is going to show you where to get everything you need for Lion's Claw and a lot of the best builds in the game that I've done, my top 6 overall, pretty much by damage type and where to get everything. It's going to be a fantastic video, one of the biggest build videos I've done, so I recommend not missing out on that one. Yeah, can't wait for that video. It's going to have a full item guide, DLC prep, how to make these builds, how to get the basics for everything to start out, and then kind of like alphabetical order for the talismans, buffs, and everything you need to complete the builds, and some stuff attached in the description. It's very detailed. And that should be out the day after this one. Let's jump into equipment. We have Guts, Greatsword, and Heavy Affinity with Lion's Claw. Any seal for buffs. We hit 51 poise. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Shield Talisman, Erdtree's Favorite +2, Stone Barb Crack tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats. For stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance, 70 Strength. When we're two-handing it, we're easily hitting 99, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, and then of course we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this, and Guts, Greatsword, and Lion's Claw is my top strength build. Thanks for watching this one. Definitely be sure to sub if you haven't subbed to my channel yet. If you love Elden Ring content and you've been enjoying my content, definitely hit that subscribe button. And this completes the top 8 playlist. This is going to be awesome. The playlist is finally complete. Other than that one mistake with the rusted anchor, pretty much everything has been solid and phenomenal for these builds. There are a playlist on my channel now by damage type that you can easily find. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to sub and catch you guys soon.